1. Me-262 Schwalbe, Germany's flying Wunderwaffe. The Me-262 Swallow was the world's first jet-powered fighter aircraft and arguably the most prominent of Hitler's Wunderwaffe aircraft. It would have seen active service earlier in the war, but problems with metal quality, engine, and political interference meant the aircraft only saw action from April 1944. The Me-262 was so superior in the air that the Allies could only counter its effectiveness by destroying it on the ground and during takeoff and landing. Its incredibly high rate of climb compared with prop-driven fighter planes at the time meant that once airborne, the Me-262 was almost impossible to intercept. Had the Me-262 been introduced earlier in the war, it might have had a significant impact, but the reality was that too few were manufactured. Allied bombing had a disastrous effect on Germany's ability to source quality material, and it slowed down production time drastically. As a result, Germany decided to focus on producing aircraft that were easier to manufacture too, the V1. It went by many names. The Germans named it the Kirschkern, Cherry Stone, or the Makefer, Maybug, while the British called it the Buzz Bomb and the Doodlebug. The Reich Aviation Ministry designated it the Phi 103, but whatever name it went by, the V1 was a terrifying weapon. It was the first of the so-called Vergeltungswaffen, or vengeance weapons, used by Nazi Germany and designed to strike terror into the hearts of the enemy. The V1 was the world's first cruise missile. The Nazis first launched V1s at London on June 13, 1944, 1 week after the Allied landings at Normandy. At first, over 100 V1s were being launched every day, but as the Allies progressed further eastwards, the V1's limited range meant that targets had to move eastwards as well. As England fell out of range, V1s were launched at targets in the Netherlands and Belgium and continued right up until the end of the war. 3. Me-163 Comet. The Me-163 represented an extremely bold experiment with weaponry. This Wunderwaffe was extremely dangerous to fly, partly due to the fact that it was not a true jet aircraft, but a flying rocket with a skid for landing gear. Upon takeoff, the wheels would detach, and landing would require the pilot to land the plane on the runway using a skid. The hazardous operation of this aircraft was also compounded by the highly volatile rocket propellant called T-Stoff, which led to many mishaps, including the death of the high-ranking Oberleutnant and fighter ace Joseph Paz. 4. Schwerer Gustav. Schwerer Heavy. Gustav was the largest artillery piece to have ever been built. It was a railway gun designed specifically for destroying French forts along the Maginot Line. The gun was not ready in time for the campaign against France, but it did see action later in the war during the siege of Sevastopol, where it proved highly effective with its 800mm 31-inch shells. During the siege, it destroyed a munitions depot located 30 meters, 98 feet below ground. Fortunately for the Soviets, Sevastopol was the only instance where they would be on the receiving end of Schwerer Gustav. The gun was moved to Leningrad to take part in the siege there, but the Soviets had already lifted the siege before the gun could fire. 5. Panzer VA Maus. The Maus Mouse was anything but little. It was the biggest fully enclosed armored fighting vehicle ever built. Weighing in at 207 tons and with a length of 33 feet, 10.2 meters, the Maus would have certainly been a terrifying sight on the battlefield if it had ever been deployed. 5 were ordered, but only 2 were ever built. They underwent trials in late 1944, and the 128mm gun was proven to be capable of destroying any and all armored vehicles used by the Allies, with some tests being successful at 3,500 meters, 11,500 feet. This Wunderwaffe, however, had considerable drawbacks. Building an engine powerful enough but small enough to fit in the vehicle was a challenge, and during testing, the fastest speed ever achieved was 14 miles per hour, 22 kilometers per hour. In addition to its slow speed, the vehicle's weight made it impossible to cross most bridges. As such, the tank was intended to drive through rivers with the aid of a snorkel and was supposedly capable of submerging 26 feet, 8 meters. 6. The Horten Ho 229. A Wunderwaffe far ahead of its time. The project was a response to Hermann Göring's demand for a light bomber that could carry 1,000 kilograms for 1,000 kilometers at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour. The result was a flying wing design that did more than its creators realized. Like many other German Wunderwaffe, this machine never made it out of the prototype phase. Only 3 aircraft were built, but none ever saw action beyond the testing phase. After the war, tests were done on mock-up versions of the Ho-229, and was found that the aircraft did, indeed, have a smaller radar cross-section than other conventional aircraft at the time, although not significant. Although tests showed only a moderate improvement in the size of radar cross-section, being 80% of contemporary prop-driven aircraft, the Horton speed, combined with this reduction, would have made it nigh impossible to intercept. 7. The V-2. Perhaps one of the best known of Hitler's Wunderwaffe was the V-2, a successor to the V-1 and the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. The V-2 was Hitler's revenge for the Allied bombing of German cities, and they began falling from the skies over Allied cities from September 1944 onwards. Over 3,000 were launched during the course of the war, and over 9,000 civilian targets lost their lives. But its most deadly toll was on the forced laborers. Over 12,000 laborers and concentration camp prisoners died in the production of these weapons. The guidance system was a particular problem for the Allies, as it used a complex set of gyroscopes that could not be jammed. Initially, the British assumed the guidance system made use of radio, and efforts to jam the weapon proved useless, especially since it descended on its targets at a speed of almost Mach 3. The V-2 traveled at supersonic speeds, and there was no defense against it. It struck without warning and made no sound before impact. They were launched from mobile platforms that could be well hidden in wooded areas, making it extremely difficult for Allied bombers to spot and neutralize them. 8. Land Cruiser P-1000 Rat, a Wunderwaffe too big for the battlefield. Although it never made it out of the concept stage, it deserves a place as one of Germany's Wunderwaffe for the sheer audaciousness of its design. The P-1000 Rat was more than a tank. At over 1,000 tons, the vehicle was more of a mobile battle platform than an actual tank. The vehicle was designed to be a platform for two 280mm guns and protected by four 128mm anti-aircraft guns. Between 20 and 41 soldiers would operate the entire machine. Hitler was enamored with the concept, but Albert Speer, seeing no use for such a ridiculously large tank, canceled the project before any prototype could be built. Of course, this list is only a small portion of the Wunderwaffe employed or imagined by the Nazis. Some designs were outlandishly ridiculous, some were science fiction that would take decades to build, and some were absolutely deadly. If there's one thing we know for sure, it's that the cruel and unstoppable Nazis were not lacking in the creativity department. Thanks for watching.